On the educational side, one of the real smoking guns, if we have a smoking gun at all, that we found in doing this research, which went on for multiple years, is looking into the schools. So in the United States, in the 90s, there was sort of a philosophical change across the states, and they moved from budgeting their schools using things like the number of teachers and the number of students, and base the budgets on that. We call that input budgeting, as you know, being an economist yourself, but moved to outcomes. And so about 30 states put in incentives, that were ended up to be called accountability laws of various types, to tell the schools that their budgets would be subject to measures of how well the school did and how well the kids did. So things like test scores, graduation rates, and the like, and various ways and combinations became the way that the budgets were allocated, at least parts of the budget. So this pushed the schools to move to perform along those lines. And of course, in 2003, you get President Bush with No Child Left Behind making this same philosophy something that was a national philosophy. If the schools and the states wanted federal funds, of course they did, they would also have to move to this outcome-based performance incentives model to get the money from the federal government.
So let me state back in candy wrapper form what you just said, and you'll tell me if I've mangled it completely, which is that one of the major factors here is the rise of standardized testing, which is being used to measure performance. But when you standardize, and here I'm going to editorialize a little bit as well as repeat back, when you standardize, you lose some nuance, you lose the qualitative stuff, you focus on the quantitative stuff, and any variation, for example, in child behavior might endanger that or threaten that outcome, which some of the players in the system now have strong incentive to pursue, and that might contribute, or perhaps in your finding does contribute to the rise in behavior-related diagnoses like ADHD. Is that fair, what I just said?
Well, I'm going to give you an A- there. I think it's pretty fair. Perfect it's not, but I think for on the fly, very impressive. So the schools now had to
doing my best.
All right. The schools essentially now had to say, it's not only standardized tests, it's tests in general. Any kind of testing becomes quantitative, of course. Some of the states also use graduation rates or combinations of the two, but the key thing is performance metrics, things that you can measure and quantify about the school and the students. So if you, so now with ADHD, the teacher is seeing that a particular child, usually a boy coming in the first grade, is often when they're diagnosed, is all of a sudden the teacher sees this child, and perhaps the child seems to be having problems, sitting in the chair and behaving. So they might say to the parent, you might want to have your child looked at. And the school is doing a positive thing there. The child may have a problem, and if they get the proper diagnosis, which is a key part of our book as well, we think there's a lot of bad diagnosis going on that's cheap and easy to do. But if it's a proper diagnosis, the school is hoping it will help the child perform. Also, of course, the child, particularly boys, again, might be disruptive in the classroom and hurt the learning of others. So there's an incentive to have the child treated. That's a good thing. Now, on the other hand, if the school is also pushing to get lots of kids diagnosed, you might say, what's going on here? It's kind of, these kids are marginal. There were some states, and
well, I'm going to have to cut you off there because we're running out of time.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
So, no, that's all right. Sorry myself. I wish we had more time. It's a fascinating topic. Maybe we'll have you back to talk about it. In the meantime, I'm going to encourage all our listeners to read The ADHD Explosion, Myths, Medication, Money, and Today's Push for Performance by Dr.